Well, Marvel Zombies has officially came out, and holy moly, what a show it was. This is probably one of like the greatest Marvel shows that we've gotten in recent years because a lot of the Marvel shows lately they haven't been bad by any means. They've just kind of been a little bit lackluster, but this show went hard. I'm not gonna lie because it does not hold back with its TVMA rating. Because yes, this show is TVMA, so yeah, it does not hold back in the slightest. Just like Okoye says in the show, no one is safe. Like they do not hold back on slaughtering everybody, and it was a crazy time, to be honest. This show is only 4 episodes, unfortunately, but it is understandable because I think originally it was going to be a movie. That was their initial plan when they put this, project together. But because Spider Man was in the What If show, they had to change it from a movie to a TV show because Sony has the movie rights for Spider Man. So therefore, they couldn't make it like a film to drop on Disney Plus. So they had to backtrack because of Spider-Man being in the movie, and then change it to a 4 episode TV show, which is why, again, it's only 4 episodes, and why none of the shows or like any of the episodes have like any title names or anything like that. That was kind of interesting when I logged on to Disney Plus to watch it. It just simply said episode one, episode two, three, four, and I was like, huh, that's kind of weird. It didn't even give episode names, but that's because again, it wasn't going to be a TV show. It was going to be a movie, but because Spider-Man they had to make it a show, which I guess at the end of the day is understandable. But either way, the show went hard. Even though each episode's only like half an hour, it's fine. It doesn't matter because, again, they had to change it from a movie. So, yeah, without any further ado, let's dive into spoilers because there's a lot that I want to talk about. Because, like I said, they do not hold back in this show because, you might think that some characters, because they're main characters, they would survive the show, but no, right off the gate they just start dropping my flies because they they introduce you to Kamala Khan, Kate Bishop, and Riri Williams. Those are the first three survivors that you're introduced to in this show. And basically they've just been chilling, living in New York, trying to survive this, plague that's going on. And then they get this bright idea because they end up finding this like transmitter inside a zombie, and so they decide, you know what, there's a shield base in Ohio, so let's go from New York to Ohio. Perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. Not like there's a zombie plague going on or anything like that. So they get in the car and they just start driving to Ohio, and they're looking around. They're like, oh, there's a storm outside. That's pretty cool. But then you find out it's not just any storm because it's actually Captain Marvel and Icarus fighting each other. Yes, that is right. Icarus from the Eternals. He's the only Eternal that shows up in this, you know, zombie thing, and he just starts duking it out with Captain Marvel. And I gotta say, it was a pretty insane fight to say the least. He doesn't speak or anything like that, but he's just there fighting Captain Marvel, and then they're like attacked by this horde of zombies, and then Kate Bishop's like, "Oh, I got this trick arrow that I stole from Hawkeye because Hawkeye attacked them earlier on in the episode," and so she's like, "You know what? Let's see what this trick arrow does," and then she fires it at Captain Marvel, and then it just like goes through her, and then it like explodes into confetti, and I'm just like, wow. And then even she's like, oh damn, and then immediately gets incinerated. And when that happened, I was just like, well, damn. GG Kate Bishop. Yeah, because freaking Captain Marvel just immediately just like evaporates her, and she just incinerates, and she's dead. That's it. GG's. And then Riri Williams is like, oh, get Kamala Khan out of here because, we're all gonna die. So basically Friday like takes, Kamala Khan away, and Riri Williams is just there fighting, so you're kinda just like left to assume that she's dead. And then that is when Kamala Khan meets up with Blade, who in this universe is actually Moon Knight, because in this universe he's called Blade Knight, and he is the avatar of Khonshu because, as he explains it, Mark Spector ended up getting infected by the, zombie virus thing, and so he was instead taken over as like the avatar of the night, basically. So he takes Kamala Khan to the Shield base in Ohio, and that is where they meet up with Red Guardian, Yelena Belova, and also Melena's there as well. And then there's this whole like zombie fight that they have, and that is where Melena sacrifices herself to basically try to control the zombies. And then Okoye shows up, who is a zombie, and she is like, "Oh, the zombies follow you? Well, guess what? That ain't gonna happen." And then she just kills Melena. And when that happened, I was just like, alrighty, nobody is safe in this universe because yeah, each episode you get like at least like 3 or so character deaths, and it is crazy because yeah, they just are all start dropping one by one. Like Yelena even ends up dying in like the third episode, and then Red Guardian ends up dying in also the third episode. Oh wait, no, Yelena I'm pretty sure ends up dying in the second episode, and then Red Guardian ends up dying in the third episode because basically they end up going to New Asgard because they need a spaceship to take to the Nova Corp so that the Nova Corp can like basically save the planet. And so they go to New Asgard to get the transmitter thing onto the ship so that they can take it to the Nova Corp. And then basically Wanda Maximoff shows up as like just a normal human being. And of course everybody's like, "Oh, you're infected. What are you doing here?" And Wanda's like, "Do I look infected?" And they're like, "Well, no, because she's just a normal person." But then it turns out that she's basically poisoned all the food, or like made all the food like fake, and where it's actually like zombie food. So basically, the people who have been eating the food end up becoming zombies, and that is how Red Guardian ends up becoming infected because he eats the food that is there. And so yeah, basically they have to flee New Asgard because it's basically been taken over by Wanda Maximoff. And then they get to the Nova Corp, and then they realize, or they get into space where they end up meeting the Nova Corp, but then they end up realizing that the Nova Corp already knew about the zombie virus and have just basically been surrounding Earth so that, the zombie virus doesn't escape to like other planets. And so they're like, "Oh, go back to Earth, otherwise we're gonna evaporate your ass." And so they're like, "Oh well, damn." Turns out the transmitter meant nothing because that Nova Corp already knew, and they ain't gonna help. So yeah, they end up having to flee back to Earth. And also, this is a continuation of the What If Zombies episode, and it does give you that resolution in episode 3, where basically it shows, what happens when Spider-Man, Black Panther, and Ant-Man went to Wakanda to try to, like, save the, zombie plague, because in the What If show, it was Spider-Man, Black Panther, Ant-Man, and then you had Bucky Barnes, you had the Hulk, and you also had Vision as well, I'm pretty sure. And they were like trying to figure out what to do about the zombie plague, and that is when they were like, "Oh, we can take this thing to Wakanda, and we can save the world by using like the Mind Stone, right?" And so basically, it never tells us what happens to Bucky Barnes because Bucky Barnes in the What If show ended up getting like tossed out into the distance by Wanda, and that was it. Like he never appears in the zombies show. So like we don't know if he's still infected or if he's alive. We have no idea. However, we do find out what happens to Bruce Banner because basically he ends up surviving the What If episode because at the end of the episode he was just left fighting the horde of zombies and Wanda Maximoff. So basically what ends up happening is that the Kamertage, I'm pretty sure is what the name is, they end up finding him, and basically they end up being, because basically what happens is Spider-Man, Ant-Man, and Black Panther go to Wakanda. That is where Zombie Thanos is at the end of the What If episode. And so they end up fighting Zombie Thanos, and then Thor, Rocket, and Groot end up showing up to Wakanda to try and fight Thanos. And then Rocket and Groot just immediately get evaporated by the Power Stone. They show up, and Thanos uses the gauntlet, just like does this with the Power Stone, and Rocket and Groot are just, they're dead. And when that happened, I was like, well, alrighty then. And he even like semi kills Thor, not really, because he like shoots it at Thor, and Thor like is presumed dead because he falls to the ground. And then basically Black Panther ends up sacrificing himself to stop Thanos because Thanos ends up getting the Mind Stone because he like used the Space Stone to teleport the Mind Stone away from Black Panther who had the Mind Stone. And just basically puts the Mind Stone into his gauntlet, and then Black Panther ends up sacrificing himself to, save the planet from, the snap and all that. And so basically, Kamar-Taj ends up finding Bruce Banner, and he transforms into the Hulk so that he can contain the blast, because there was this huge blast that happens because Black Panther like pushes Thanos into like this reactor core that's made of vibranium, and it like explodes, and so Hulk ends up containing the blast and ends up becoming Infinity Hulk, which is a crazy like form of Hulk because he was absolutely insane in the finale because he's there like just chilling, making sure the blast doesn't like explode or anything like that. He's chilling. Wanda shows up with her horde of zombies to try and stop the Hulk, and he is just like punching the zombies, and he's like basically destroying the zombies. And so the remaining survivors by episode 4 are Kamala Khan, Shang-Chi, Katie, who ends up kind of using the rings along with Shang-Chi because his father, basically the way that Shang-Chi gets the rings in this universe is that his father shows up to San Francisco where the zombie apocalypse starts, and he's fighting the zombies, but then Shang-Chi ends up getting bit, so then he sacrifices the rings and himself, or he basically gives the rings to Shang-Chi and sacrifices himself so that, Shang-Chi can become a zombie, and so that is how, he still, like, has the infected arm, but he's not, infected or anything like that, so basically that is how he gets the rings in this universe, and he also he, like, splits half the rings with Katie, so both him and Katie use the rings in this universe, and it was kind of cool to see them, both use the rings in action. But yeah, like I said, it does not hold back in killing off like every character in this show. Basically, what ends up happening is Kamala Khan, and then the remaining survivors are Shang-Chi, Katie, and then Spider-Man and Ant-Man are both still alive in this universe. And then there's like some other Kamar-Taj members. They end up going to where the Hulk is. Oh, and also Valkyrie is also still alive as well. They end up going to where Infinity Hulk is to try and like protect him so that Wanda doesn't get to him. They're fighting the zombies, everything's going well, and then basically they just all start getting defeated because Thor ends up showing up because he was like semi dead but also not really dead, if you know what I'm saying. Because when they go to New Asgard, Thor's just kind of like sitting in a chair, and then when they're trying to leave, Wanda's like stopping them, and then Thor shows up and has like this insane battle with Wanda. Like I'm talking when Thor and Wanda were duking it out, I was like, holy moly, that is pretty cool. And Thor basically like makes Kamala Khan an Avenger because she doesn't want to leave Thor because he's like basically the only Avenger that's like still left. And so he's like, no, you need to go and save this planet. I gotta deal with Wanda. Another fun fact that I forgot to talk about in this review is that Chris Hemsworth does not voice Thor in this show. He's instead voiced by Greg Furman, and that's pretty interesting because I didn't even realize that it wasn't Chris Hemsworth when he was talking in the show because it sounded pretty much exactly like him. But yeah, he's voiced by Greg Furman, and I don't know if maybe it was a budgetary reason and they couldn't get Chris Hemsworth, or maybe they just decided that, you know what, Thor's only going to be talking in this one scene because, yeah, he doesn't talk when he shows up in Wakanda, or, when the gang shows up to New Asgard. He only talks when he's fighting Wanda and telling Kamala Khan to leave. So maybe they decided that it would be cheaper to get someone else. I'm not too sure. But yeah, Greg Furman voices Thor in the What If Zombie show. And it's also interesting because Chris Hemsworth has voiced Thor before in like the What If show. So again, I don't know why they didn't decide to go with Chris Hemsworth, but yeah, that's just an interesting fun fact that I thought I'd talk about. So they're duking it out, and then Thor ends up getting infected and basically shows up to the battle with Infinity Hulk, and then he just starts evaporating everybody. Like I'm talking, Blade gets evaporated, and then some of the other Kamar-Taj members gets evaporated. It was pretty crazy when he shows up and just starts, evaporating everybody. I was like, holy moly. But yeah, Thor ends up duking it out with Infinity Hulk. They're having a little battle, and then Infinity Hulk ends up defeating Thor. And then Wanda Maximoff ends up getting to Infinity Hulk, which is what they were trying to prevent. And then basically she's like, oh, we need to heal this planet. And she's like trying to like convince Kamala to like, let her heal the planet. And she's like, no, you're not trying to heal the planet. You're killing everybody. And then she sees that everyone is, dying. And so she's like, all right, whatever, screw it. And then she basically allows Wanda to heal the planet because she ends up waking up in her bedroom and she sees Riri Williams and Kate Bishop and she's excited, but then reality starts like glitching, and then you see Riri Williams, who is still alive. She did not die because in the first episode, she has like this injection thing that she like sticks into her arm because she ends up getting bit while fighting the zombies, and she's like, this isn't how I wanted to test this, and injects it into her arm. And it seems like it works because at the end of the last episode, she's there fighting the zombies as like reality starts like glitching because it turns out Wanda was a liar. She did not heal the world. Instead, she's basically turned it into like this fake aid, kind of like in WandaVision. And so, yeah, Riri Williams is there like fighting the zombies, and she's like, "Oh, everything's fake. Don't believe it." And then that is where the episode ends because she's like hijacked the system is what she says, and she's like, everything's fake. Don't believe anything that you see. And then it ends with Kamala just like sitting there like, what? And then it ends. Overall, it was a crazy show. I liked that they went with the TV MA rating because if they would have went PG, that would have just been, kind of boring. But I like the fact that they went with the TV MA rating and it does not hold back in the slightest. So yeah, like I said, nobody is safe in this show. It went absolutely crazy. I'm pretty sure the only people who are still alive by the end of the show are, of course, Kamala Khan and Riri Williams. That's about it. Everyone else is practically dead by the end of the show. Well, I don't know about, because it doesn't show anyone dying. It doesn't show like Spider-Man, Ant-Man, or Valkyrie dying, at least not to my memory. Maybe it does. It does show like Spider-Man about to get eaten by the Wasp, I'm pretty sure, because she's like in the giant form about to eat Spider-Man, and then Ant-Man's like head that he's in, or like the case that his head is in, starts to like crack. But it doesn't show them dying, so maybe they're still alive. Who knows? But yeah, for the most part, everybody is dead. So who knows if there's a cure that they can find because Riri Williams, who was bitten, is still alive. So maybe the injection that she, used on herself worked, and maybe there is a cure that could be explored in like a potential season 2 or something like that. But overall, I really dug this show. I like that it did not hold anything back. And if I had to rate the show, I would give it maybe a 9 out of 10. I thought this was a really solid show. I like that they decided to make it animated because, they could do a bunch of crazy stuff with animation. And yeah, they did do a bunch of crazy stuff because, like I said, the fight between Captain Marvel and Icarus went hard. The fight with Wanda and Thor was also, crazy. And the fight with Thor and Infinity Hulk was also crazy as well. Overall, I really enjoyed this show, so yeah, I give it a 9 out of 10. But overall, I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. We're only 69 subscribers away from 700. As you can see, we finally got the clock on the wall there. We are at 631. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe and let me know what you thought of the Marvel Zombie show. And if you want to see a potential second season of this show and what they can maybe do with the second season, if they can find a cure or something like that. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this video. So without any further ado, see you guys in the next one. Peace out.